It's the one and only Dr. Bruce Goldberg. Bruce, welcome back.
Well, it's a pleasure to reincarnate with you, Dr. J. One thing that your listeners might remember, several years ago, CBS did a television movie called The Search for Grace, and that movie was based upon my second book. It was a documented case of reincarnation, which has done rather well and been aired on the various cable networks after the CBS airing. So it just shows you, and they documented the case. So it wasn't just my work; it was an independent research corroboration of the work. So some of the things that we do here today, you can see there's actual real science behind it, not just the interesting part.
I should have mentioned that before you did because that is what a huge feat, by the way, for CBS to take a book and put it into the mainstream by making it into a movie. And also at the same time, it just goes to show that the mainstream is starting to shift to start understanding these instead of calling them fringe topics to consider the mainstream. I recently saw an old Unsolved Mysteries episode, and what it showed is several children under the age of 7, and what they did is each one of them remembered up until 7 that they had memories of their deceased loved ones. So if it was like a little boy, for instance, if his great grandfather died, he had his memories. They would go into a restaurant and he would say, "When I was old, I would eat here." Or he would say, "Hello, Jenny," to the waitress who's like, in her 70s and she used to serve the great grandfather. And that just anomaly stuck with me. It's like, hold on, people. Whoever's saying that past regressions or we don't reincarnate, don't live other lives, is really not paying attention.
Well, there's another important point about that. Number one, they could be channeling the soul of their late relative, which is, if they're still alive now, that's probably the case. But we're talking about the fifth dimension. So let me just backtrack a little bit because that's the theme of the show today. Let's define what the fifth dimension is, because everything I deal with and everything in the New Age field really deals with the fifth dimension. So think of it this way. We live in a fifth dimensional universe. We are only able on the Earth plane to use our senses to see three dimensions: length, width, and depth.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Well, physicists classify time as the fourth dimension. It's used in the mathematical equations, especially quantum mechanics. And anything beyond time is considered the fifth dimension. So when your listeners, I'm sure they're familiar with things like the astral plane, like in out-of-body experiences, or the various other dimensions, the causal, mental, etheric, or soul plane, as my work and some of the other, my colleagues and some of the other theologies talk about. But there's also another concept, and I want to relate it to the Search for Grace movie to see how this works out. Parallel universes. Now, parallel universes is not just a sci-fi theme or a Hollywoodization. It's actually real. There's really no real argument. The mathematics gives us parallel universes. We get that from Einstein's theory of relativity over 114 years ago. But the thing here is that when you look at parallel universes, that's actually the fifth dimension. And some of the techniques I work with, what I call my new you technique, I train people to actually see into the fifth dimension. And they can actually, when you go into parallel universes, the really important thing about this is you can actually change the aspects in your life that you don't like. And let me give you an example. Way back in 1990, early part of 1994, when the movie for television was being considered by the network, and by the way, CBS is not known at that time for doing metaphysics,
Yes.
That's the Matlock network, you know what I mean? We're talking about, an older demographic, very conservative and very anti-anything metaphysical. So my project was being held up, and I did my own techniques of perceiving the different universes that were out there. So the universe that I was on, let's call that universe number one, I went into the future by using the techniques of age progression. Remember, I was the one who developed the field of future life progression with my first book, Past Lives, Future Lives, right? And I saw that on that particular universe, the movie was not going to air. So what I did was I laid out the different other pathways or universes, I call them frequencies, and I picked frequency number 4 in which the movie did air, and that's the frequency that we're on now. Okay, so in other words, I was able to switch tracks, and I train people to do this. Okay, my newest book, Exploring the Fifth Dimension, it's all about parallel universes as well as out-of-body experiences and teleportation. So people can do that, and I look upon that as a form of psychic empowerment because you can take charge of your life. Let's say, for example, somebody has a really bad problem. They may have lost a limb. They have an incurable disease. They have a criminal record. They have a drug addiction or 5 ex-wives that are bothering them. Whatever's going on. There's nothing they can do in this dimension, on this parallel universe, other than live it out and suffer, but they can change parallel universes in which they are the same person on the other universe, but the events are different. And in some cases, medically they're different, meaning that they don't have the same incurable disease or a lost limb or whatever. So going into parallel universes is not just work with me, but it also helps people to empower themselves and to not have to face the consequences of what's going on now. So what happens to the universe as they leave? Nothing. It goes on. You're just not aware of it. Just like if you're watching a TV show on, say, NBC, and all of a sudden somebody says, hey, man, you got to watch the show on ABC, and you change channels, what happens to the original show? It's still being aired, and it's watched by millions of people, you see? Because the television signal, like a computer signal, is electromagnetic radiation, which is exactly what the soul is, and we're dealing with the soul. So that's what parallel universes are all about, and that's what I call my new you technique. And by the way, anyone can do that, not just me or a few of my patients. It's there for the universe. As you might say, it's a buffet for the universe.
Some people talk about what basically you described about how you looked into which frequency, the fourth frequency, and which aired your movie, as the law of attraction. What do you say about that?
Well, it's not just the law of attraction because, look, a lot of people are attracted to things, whether they want to have a great relationship, make a lot of money, become famous, whatever their goals are. Just because you have a desire for it, that doesn't do anything. I mean, that's nice, but if anything, it's frustrating if you don't achieve it. You know, I live in Los Angeles. You live here too, right?
Yes.
How many women come here who want to become famous actors?
Oh, geez, millions, Dr. Goldberg.
And how many make it? How many make it? You know, sort of like it's like the old song. It's like the song "Do You Know the Way to San Jose?" You know, Dionne Warwick. You know, right?
Yeah.
Talking about actors winding up as waitresses and waiters. So the point is that if you have a goal, the law of attraction is really. Let me show you how I use the law of attraction. I deal with this with relationships as well as in professional goals. But let's talk about relationships. So let's say you want to develop a great relationship. You can then access your higher self. We call that the superconscious mind, the perfect form of your soul's energy. Okay, and you can use that to send out the energy to attract a quality soul equivalent, at least what your desires, into your life. That person, even if they live in a different state or a different country, will be within the same geographical area for some reason, or you will be in theirs, and then you'll be able to meet. So that's the law of attraction. But that has nothing to do with parallel universes, because to do parallel universe switching, you have to connect with your higher self. It's a very complex situation. It deals with geophysics and quantum mechanics, and I mean, it can be done, but it's not just a wishing and a hoping. You got to do a lot of other stuff for it.
You got to act. That's for sure.
Well, you got to connect with your higher self. See, everything I deal with, if there's one theme or bottom line to what I deal with as a New Age metaphysician, is connecting people to the higher self. If you do that, you win. Because in the universe, there only are two emotions. People should understand this. Number one, fear. That causes all the problems. Number two, unconditional love. If you move towards unconditional love, you're going to move towards ascension. You're going to have a great life. If you move towards fear, you're going to be a neurotic mess, and you're going to have a lot of problems. So if you want unconditional love, people like to have that with relationships. Well, human beings are not capable of that. If you want unconditional love, I would suggest you get a dog. I prefer a miniature schnauzer myself. It's tough for people to have unconditional love.
It is.
You want to
very
move towards
tough.
that. You want to move towards it. The point is, you don't have to attain it, but you want to move towards that goal. But if you're fear-based, you ever notice how, let me give you my analysis of society. And this is where psychic empowerment, which is the theme of what I do, comes in. Society is controlled by three bureaucracies. We're talking about civilization, Western civilization, or anywhere around the world that's technologically advanced. Okay? Number one is government. Government scares the kazoo out of you, and they use fear. Don't they? If you don't pay your taxes, we'll throw you in jail, put you on the news.
Of course.
Right? Okay.
Imprison you, tax you, everything, right? It's always about fear to control us.
Fortunately, they can only hurt you in this lifetime. The second bureaucracy group is called corporations, the corporate world. It's what I call We Don't Care Inc. If you want your Gucci shoes, air-conditioned cars, blah, 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 you have to pay X number of dollars, and if you call their toll-free numbers for a problem, they usually ignore you. The corporations can be pretty cruel and pretty creepy and jealous and selfish and whatever. Okay, but the corporate world does great things too. I mean, I enjoy my air-conditioned home and things. Okay. The third bureaucracy is religion. What religion does is it uses fear to scare you into eternal damnation if you don't follow their rules.
Like hell,
So,
right? The Catholic Church mentions if you don't follow this, you're going to go to hell.
Let me explain. You can worship. I don't care what people worship, as long as they don't use their theology as a way to hate me or somebody else who doesn't believe in what they believe in. That's all. You want to move towards love, not towards hate, and not towards bigotry or negativity. You want to move towards love. So if somebody has a different, I have friends of mine who are very different from me as far as their philosophies about things, whether it be sports, politics, theology, whatever it is. I listen to them. I won't change my mind and jump on their bandwagon, but I show them respect. I don't say, you creep, get out of here, But today, we have a very divisive society, especially politically, as you know, and even theologically, and that's a real problem. So to me, that's not very spiritual. You want to be able to listen to people, and, you can, you want to move towards love rather than fear or hate or any of the 7 deadly sins, Those are a no-no, and that's what this is all about, that your higher self is the answer to that, because your higher self comes from the God energy complex. It's unconditional love. It's perfect. You can't beat that. You can't. No therapist, no drug, no corporation, no radio or TV host. Nobody can beat the higher self. Okay, it's who you are, and everybody has an individual higher self. And my purpose is to connect them to that. So when you connect to the higher self, let me tell you what you can do. You can read the Akashic records. For the benefit of your listeners that may not know what that means, your Akashic records is a chart, so to speak, like a medical chart, of your past, present, future, and parallel lives. So when you go to a real psychic, not the phony ones, of which most of them are, but there are real psychics out there, a small percentage, when they actually read you correctly, what they're reading is your Akashic records. And I train people how to do that. You can, anyone can read the Akashic records with a little training. So it allows you to perceive your past, your future, somebody else's past or future too, or even parallel lives. And by doing that, you can avoid mistakes. Let me give you a good example of time travel and Akashic records. Several years ago, I was working with a woman. I'll call her Tammy, not her real name. She just graduated from college. She lives in New York City. And she's going to spend the last half of the summer in Paris and Europe with her friends before she goes to graduate school. Now, this is 1996. It's an important date. So this is June. She comes to me. She saw my movie, The Search for Grace, and she wanted to learn how to do out-of-body experiences, right? So when you go out of the body, you're in the 5th dimension, which means you can see past, present, future events, even parallel universes. So I work with her. She's a great student. You might say great patient. She's going out of the body, and she sees things while she's in L.A. that are happening like a day in advance, and they do come true. So she has a very excellent track record. So I finish up with her in a week. She goes back home, and then she calls me at the end of June, and she goes, "Doctor, this is Tammy. I have an emergency." And I said, "Look, I retired from dentistry to get away from that. What's on your mind?" And she said, "I use your techniques to go out of the body and to see what my Paris trip is going to look like, and I see myself taking off at the jet from JFK, right?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "The plane goes up in the air, immediately crashes, and everybody dies, including me. What do I do?" And I said, "Look, Tammy, I don't want to run your life. Just change your flight plans and call me at the end of the summer, okay?" And she goes, "Oh, really? That's like radical, Okay." So she calls me at the end of August, and she's safe, right? And she told me the interesting aspect of this. She was going to go on TWA Flight 800.
Ooh.
Well, if you remember, July 17th, 1996, TWA Flight 800 left JFK, went up into the air, immediately crashed. All 230 people, crew and passengers, died. She would have been 231. Now, I didn't save her life. She did. That was accessing her higher self. So you may say that was the law of attraction to keep her alive in this particular parallel universe. But that's what's going into the future can do. Now, that's obviously real. I had no way of knowing that, okay? I'm not some, I don't work for FAA here. And even if I did, I wouldn't know about plane crashes in the future either. So my point is, this is what I call age progression, going into the future. And actually, in this case, she saved her life. And people have empowered themselves by going into the future of this life to see how events can occur, so you can avoid making mistakes, as well as empower yourself. They see future lifetimes to see what they're going to be involved with, maybe departed relatives that are dead now, but not in a future life. They can reincarnate with their husband, wife, children, grandparents, or best friends, whatever. And so these are very empowering techniques that overcome the aspect of fear and allow them to progress.